If your day has been long, or loud, or full of things that needed your attention, you can let all of that go now. There is nowhere to be, nothing waiting. Tonight, you are going to travel somewhere very old and very quiet. You are going to enter the slow, patient world of a redwood tree, drifting upward through root and bark and branch, carried gently by nothing more than the pull of water through ancient wood. All you have to do is breathe and follow. Imagine you are standing at the edge of a redwood forest, somewhere along the Northern California coast, where the land meets the sea in a long, cool corridor of fog and ancient stone. It is early morning, or perhaps it is late afternoon. The light is the same here, in this forest, filtered and soft, arriving in columns through the canopy so far overhead that you have to look up for a long time before you can find the sky. The light does not come in beams. Exactly. It diffuses. It spreads through layers of mist and branch and needle until it arrives at the forest floor as something gentle and green and without edges. You can feel it on your skin. That light. It is cool and soft, the way light feels when it has traveled a long distance and given most of itself away before arriving. You are standing on damp earth. Beneath your feet, the ground is soft and deep. Layers of fallen needles and bark and moss that have been accumulating here for centuries, slowly composting, slowly becoming soil, slowly feeding what grows above. The texture underfoot is yielding, almost cushioned, and there is a scent rising from it that is very particular and very old, something between rain and cedar and the inside of a wooden chest that has been closed for decades. It is the smell of decomposition completed gently, of old things becoming new things without any hurry. All around you, the trees rise. They do not shoot up or spike into the sky. They rise with such unhurried permanence that the word rising barely applies. They simply are, and have always been, and will continue to be. Their trunks are wide, wider than you can embrace, wider than several people could embrace together, and their bark is extraordinary. It is deep red, brown, fibrous and furrowed, and it runs in long vertical lines from the earth up into the canopy, like grain in ancient wood, like rivers viewed from very high above. The bark is soft to the touch. You can press your fingertips into it and feel it give slightly a gentle resilience. Spongy and thick, the way bark builds itself over centuries to protect the living wood within. The closest tree to you is enormous. You have come to stand beside it without entirely meaning to, drawn by its presence, by the sense of gravity that very old things exert. Its trunk is perhaps 12 feet across at its base, perhaps more. Roots extend from it in great ridges, surfacing from the soil like the backs of enormous slow animals before submerging again, disappearing into the dark earth at a shallow angle. Moss grows along the roots where they surface, intensely green, almost luminous against the red, brown of the bark. Small ferns grow in the angles where root meets soil, their fronds curled and ancient, looking even when young. You place your palm flat against the trunk. The bark is cool, not cold. Exactly. It has absorbed enough of the diffuse forest light to be merely cool, pleasantly so, the temperature of a stone in shade. It is rough against your palm, fibrous, and if you press slightly, you can feel the faint give of it. Beneath the bark, is living wood, cambium and sapwood and heartwood, and within that wood, right now, water is moving, very slowly, almost imperceptibly, but moving, drawn upward by processes so quiet and continuous that the tree performs them without anything that could be called effort. The water simply goes, has always gone, will go for as long as the tree stands. You stand here for a while, your palm on the bark, and you try to feel it, the movement of water within. You cannot, quite. The motion is too slow, the tree too large, the distance from bark surface to water too great. But you know it is happening, and that knowing is its own kind of contact. You are touching a system in motion, a system that has been in motion since before your great grandparents were born, that will continue in motion long after any person now living has completed their time on this earth. There is comfort in this, an enormous, quiet comfort, the kind that comes not from anything being resolved, but from being in the presence of something that does not need resolution. The tree is not working toward anything. It is not attempting anything. It is simply doing what it does, with the full and unself, conscious dedication of something that has never done anything else. This is where your journey begins. Tonight, you are going to follow that water. You're going to drift downward first, into the cool dark of the soil, into the network of roots that spreads in all directions beneath this ancient tree. A network so extensive that it reaches farther than the tree is tall, threading through the earth in every direction, patient and unseen. And then, very slowly, you are going to travel upward, through root, through bark, through the pale wood of the trunk, through branch after branch, as they narrow toward the sky. You are going to drift all the way to the highest needles of this tree, to the very tips where the forest air meets the open sky, where small molecules of water are released, one by one, into the atmosphere. And then, when the upward journey is complete, you will drift back down, the same journey in reverse, through the same spaces, with the same unhurried pace. The tree will be the same in both directions. The soil will receive you at the bottom with the same cool patience it always has. There is no urgency in either direction. The tree does not hurry upward. The water does not hurry, and you will not hurry either. It is a long journey. The tree is tall, perhaps 350 feet, perhaps more. It has been growing for 1,000 years. The water you will follow has been on this journey many times before, cycling through root and wood and needle and sky and cloud and rain and soil, again and again, patient and unhurried as the tree itself. There is no rush. There is nowhere to arrive. You will drift through this journey at whatever pace feels natural, following the quiet pull of water through ancient wood, and whenever you feel yourself growing drowsy, you can let the journey continue without you, knowing that when you return, if you return, the tree will still be here, still breathing, still drawing water from the earth, as it has done every day for 1,000 years. The forest is very quiet, high above, so far overhead that it seems to belong to a different world. The highest branches of the canopy are moving slightly, turning in a wind you cannot feel from here. The sound they make is like the sound of breathing, slow and deep and continuous. You breathe with it. And now, gently, your awareness begins to travel downward, following the roots into the earth. You are underground now. It happened gradually, without drama. Your awareness simply followed the roots downward, as easily as water finds its way between stones. And now you are here, in the cool dark beneath the forest floor, drifting through soil that has been building for centuries. The darkness here is complete, but it does not feel heavy or pressing. It is a familiar dark, the kind of darkness that has always been here, that knows nothing else. It is cool and slightly damp, the temperature of a cellar or a cave, the kind of coolness that comes not from cold air but from depth, from the insulating weight of earth above. The air, such as it is, carries a rich and layered scent, minerals and moisture, and something organic and sweet. The slow chemistry of decomposition doing its quiet work in every direction. The scent changes as you move deeper. Near the surface, there is still the green quality of living roots and active biology, something faintly vegetal, faintly sweet. The smell of life in motion. Deeper, it becomes more mineral, more stone, like the smell of earth that has been compressing slowly for a very long time. There is iron in the smell, and clay, and the particular coolness of groundwater moving through deep soil. It is a smell with depth to it, with layers. The way the soil itself has layers, each one a different chapter in the long accumulation of this forest floor. The soil itself is extraordinary, though you cannot see it. You can feel it, somehow, in the way that you feel things in this kind of journey, not with hands, but with attention. The soil is deep and dark and full of history. The topmost layers are soft and loose, still being broken down, still in the process of becoming. Fallen redwood needles, compressed over decades into a mat of russet fiber, bark scales, the remains of ferns and mosses and small organisms beyond counting. All of it slowly, continuously, silently becoming soil, becoming the medium through which the tree feeds. Deeper, the soil changes. It grows denser, more mineral, clay, heavy and compressed. Particles of sand and silt pressed together over long time. Water moves through it slowly, finding the narrow channels between grains, seeping downward by degrees. Here and there, larger pieces of ancient organic matter, roots from trees that fell before this tree's time, decomposed almost entirely into soft, dark carbon, leaving their impressions in the soil, like the outlines of things that used to be. You are perhaps 3 feet down now, perhaps 4. The roots of the tree have been with you the whole way, great cables of root that diminish as they extend from the trunk, narrowing from the thickness of your arm to the thickness of your wrist, then to the thickness of your finger, then thinner still. They travel in every direction, branching and rebranching, always moving outward and sometimes downward, pressing through the soil with the patience of things that have centuries to accomplish their work. The roots do not move. Exactly. Growth moves through them, an imperceptibly slow extension of their tips, a fraction of a millimeter per day in good conditions, a barely measurable increment of progress that over years and decades becomes the remarkable, spreading network that you are floating through now. But they themselves are still and cool and slightly damp to the touch, their outer surface rough with texture, their inner chambers arranged in rings that mirror the rings of the trunk far above. You drift deeper, following a root that has pressed itself into a narrow channel in the clay. The root is the width of a pencil here. Its surface is covered with a fine fuzz you can barely perceive, root hairs. Each one a single cell extended into a filament so fine it could thread through a space between grains of sand. These root hairs are the tree's true interface with the soil. They are where the water enters. They are the beginning of the long journey upward. You settle near the tip of this root, in the cool dark. All around you, in the soil, water is present. It arrived here as rain, perhaps weeks ago, perhaps longer. It traveled down through the layers of leaf litter and topsoil, through the denser clay, finding its way through every channel and gap, patient and unhurried, until it reached this depth. Now it rests here, clinging to the surfaces of mineral grains in a thin film, held there by the attraction between water and soil particles, waiting. The root hairs are waiting too, in their way, not waiting as something conscious waits, but present, available, arranged at the interface of root and soil where water can be gathered. The process that will draw this water into the root is simple and ancient and entirely passive. No pump, no effort, simply a difference in concentration. The interior of the root contains dissolved minerals and sugars, making it slightly more concentrated than the water in the surrounding soil. Water, given any opportunity, moves toward concentration. It crosses the membranes of the root hair cells in a continuous, gentle, inevitable flow. Osmosis, water moving toward where water is needed, drawn by nothing more than the quiet physics of dissolved things. You can almost feel it. Here in the dark, a very gentle, very slow movement of moisture toward the root. Water adhering to root hair surfaces. Water crossing cell membranes. Water entering the root's interior and beginning to accumulate. Slowly, very slowly. There's a deep peace to this darkness. Nothing is competing here. The roots from neighboring trees interweave without conflict. Redwoods often fuse their root systems when they grow close together, sharing water and minerals through the connections. A slow communal exchange that happens entirely without awareness or intention. You are floating through a network of shared resource, of quiet mutual support that has been operating for centuries beneath the forest floor. The scent of the soil is all around you, mineral and cool and faintly sweet. The earth is very still. You breathe with it. There is something worth dwelling on. Here in the deep soil, the soil itself is not inert. It is alive, in its own quiet way, alive with organisms beyond counting, each one performing its small piece of the long work of decomposition and transformation. Bacteria inhabit every gram of this earth, processing organic compounds, releasing minerals, converting the remains of last season's needles into forms that roots can absorb. Fungi thread through the soil in networks so fine they are invisible, forming connections with the root tips, trading minerals for sugars in an exchange that has been operating for as long as forests have existed. Small organisms, mites, springtails, nematodes, move through the spaces between soil particles in their entirely unhurried worlds, each one living out its brief existence in the dark. None of this is urgent. All of it is continuous. The soil hums with slow life, and all of that slow life is in service of the same great cycle that the tree participates in, the same movement of water and mineral and carbon from one form to another, from soil to root to wood, to needle to air, to rain to soil again, round and round without urgency, without interruption, generation after generation, century after century. The root hairs at the tip of this root are surrounded by a community they have always been part of. Fungi called mycorrhizae have colonized the outer surfaces of the root, extending their own fine threads outward into the soil in every direction, collecting phosphorus and other minerals from distances the root itself could never reach, and trading them to the root in exchange for sugars manufactured in the needles above. The relationship is ancient, more ancient than redwood trees, more ancient than forests, a partnership that goes back to the first plants that colonized dry land hundreds of millions of years ago. The tree could not survive in this soil without its fungal partners. The fungi depend on the sugars the tree provides. Neither is complete without the other. You are floating through a community, not a community that speaks or plans or notices, but a community nonetheless, a dense, reciprocal web of dependencies and exchanges that makes the soil around you one of the most complex environments on the surface of this planet. It looks like nothing. It smells like earth and rain and old wood, but it contains, in every cubic foot, more life than a teeming city block, all of it going about its business in the cool and patient dark. The water continues to gather at the root tips, molecule by molecule, cell by cell. The slow accumulation continues. And gradually, gently, the water that has been gathering in the root, accumulating cell by cell, moment by moment, begins its long upward journey, and you travel with it. Slowly, without hurry, your awareness begins to drift upward. You are moving through the root network now, drifting upward and inward, following the water as it makes its way from the fine root tips toward the larger root structures that lead to the trunk. The roots around you grow larger as you travel. The pencil, thin root you began with joins a root, the width of your thumb, which joins a root the width of your wrist, which joins a root the width of your arm. The branching works in reverse as you travel inward. Each junction a convergence rather than a divergence. Water from dozens of tiny collection points pooling together into a single larger channel, patient and gradual. The interior of the root, as you drift through it, has a particular quality of space. You are moving through the xylem vessels, the water, conducting tissue of the tree, which are arranged in long hollow tubes stacked end to end. Their cross, walls dissolved away so that the water can move freely. The vessels are narrow, almost capillary in the finest roots, wider in the larger ones, but always small enough that surface tension plays a significant role in holding the water column together. This is important. The entire upward journey of the water depends on the water remaining connected, an unbroken column all the way from root tip to needle, held together by the attraction of water molecules to each other. Hydrogen bonds, molecules of water, each one tiny and simple, holding hands with the molecules beside it in a continuous chain. The chain is so strong, under the right conditions, that it can transmit a pulling force, the tension generated by water evaporating from the needles far above pulling on the water molecules below it, and those molecules pulling on the ones below them, and so on, all the way down to the root tips, all the way down to where new water is being absorbed from the soil. The whole tree is one long, slow pull, a continuous act of lifting that requires no energy from the tree itself, only the physics of water and the geometry of narrow tubes and the driving force of evaporation in the warm, dry air far above. You drift through this water, within this chain, and it is a very quiet thing to be a part of. The movement is slow at this depth, in these lower roots. The water is barely moving at all, perhaps a few millimeters per hour. The pace of continental drift is dramatic by comparison, but it is movement, and it is continuous, and it has been continuous in this tree for 1,000 years. You allow yourself to rest here for a while, simply present in the slow drift. There is no need to hurry toward the next part of the journey. The journey will happen at its own pace, as it always does. The water does not hurry. The roots do not hurry. The tree, in its entirety, is the opposite of hurry. It is a 1,000-year expression of patience made biological. and being inside it carries something of that quality. The urgency you may have carried with you into this forest, whatever concerns were occupying your thoughts as the day ended, they seem, from inside this tree, very small, very temporary. The tree has outlasted empires. It was growing before the calendar you use to count your years was invented. It was growing when the forest around it looked completely different, when the animals that moved through this region were different, when the human lives being lived in this part of the world were structured in ways almost entirely unlike your own. The tree noticed none of that. The tree grew its rings, one per year, consistent in its rhythm. Thin rings in dry years, wide rings in wet years, but always rings, always growth, always the slow addition of new wood to the cylinder of trunk and branch and root. Around you, the root structure has its own landscape. The outer layers of the root, the cortex, are made of living cells, and these cells are active in their slow way, managing what crosses into the water, conducting xylem at the core, taking up minerals dissolved in the water, and selecting what passes inward. Calcium and magnesium, and potassium and phosphorus, dissolved from the surrounding soil, are moving inward with the water. They will travel all the way to the needles, where they will be incorporated into new growth, into the chemistry of photosynthesis, into the long, slow building of wood and bark and needle that the tree has been doing for 1,000 years. The living cells of the root are warm compared to the surrounding soil, not dramatically, only by a fraction of a degree. The heat generated by their slow metabolism, you can almost sense it as you pass through, the faintest warmth at the core, surrounded by the coolness of earth. A larger root now, your awareness settles into it, drifting, and the space around you has widened slightly. The xylem vessels here are broader, and the water moves with fractionally more pace, though still slow, still barely measurable. Other tributaries are joining from the sides, the way streams join a river, each bringing its contribution of water and dissolved minerals from its own section of the root system. The root network of a redwood this old extends in every direction for distances that match and exceed the height of the tree, 350 feet of reach, perhaps, in every direction, threading through the soil of the forest floor, sharing that soil with the roots of other trees, occasionally touching and fusing. The network is so extensive that a portion of it was here before this tree was a tree, old root channels from predecessor trees, cleared and reoccupied. The forest continuously rebuilding itself in the same soil, with the same patient infrastructure. What you are drifting through has no clear boundary. The root system of this tree overlaps with the root systems of its neighbors, and those with their neighbors, and so on throughout the forest, a continuous, interlocking underground community that shares water and minerals and, through the mycorrhizal networks, even chemical signals that travel from tree to tree through the fungal threads, warnings of stress, offers of excess, the slow chemical language of a forest managing its collective resources. None of this involves anything like thought or intention. It is chemistry and physics, as everything in the root system is chemistry and physics, but it is chemistry and physics operating at a scale and over a time frame that produces something that, in its effects, resembles care. You drift through this network of slow care, and it is very peaceful here. You drift through this ancient network, and there is a great calm to it. Nothing is urgent. Nothing is changing quickly. The water moves, barely perceptibly, and the soil surrounds everything with its cool, mineral patience, and somewhere far above, impossibly far, It seems from here, the needles are releasing water molecules into the air, one by one, sustaining the tension that draws all of this upward. You breathe. The earth breathes around you, very slowly, and the root continues upward, growing wider, growing more certain of its direction, until it reaches the junction where root becomes trunk, where underground becomes above ground, where the long dark journey through soil gives way to something else entirely. You follow. You surface, gradually, into the base of the trunk. The transition from root to trunk is not a sudden change but a gradual one. The root simply widens and straightens, and the soil falls away from it, and the bark thickens and the root becomes the base of the tree, that broad flaring base you noticed when you were standing above, looking at the ridges where it met the ground. And then you are inside the trunk itself, in a different world from the cool dark below. The air changes here, below the soil line. There was no air, only earth and moisture, and the close presence of mineral and organic matter. Here, above the soil, there is a different quality of space, an openness that begins even within the bark, a sense that the tree is now engaged with the atmosphere in a way the roots are not. The bark outside is dry on its surface, whatever wetness the fog provides already absorbed or evaporated by mid-morning. The heartwood within the bark has its own temperature, slightly different from the bark's surface temperature, the interior retaining the coolness of the deep tree even as the exterior responds to the day. The trunk is very wide here, at the base. You are near the center, in the heartwood, which is the oldest part of the tree, the wood that was living, actively conducting water when the tree was young, and which has since been slowly transformed into something denser and more permanent. Heartwood no longer conducts water. Its role is structural now. It is the spine of the tree, the timber, the accumulation of centuries of growth laid down in rings. It is the color of old rust and cedar, deep red, brown even in the dark interior, and it is dense with tannins and resins that protect it from insects and fungi, that give the redwood its extraordinary resistance to decay. The heartwood is silent. Nothing is moving through it. It is the archive of the tree's past, each ring in it a year, each variation in ring width a record of drought or abundance, of fire or fog. You are surrounded by 1,000 years of record, compressed into the dense grain of the wood, and it is one of the quietest places you have encountered. Stone, quiet, the quiet of something that has finished its work and is resting permanently in a structural role. But you are not in the heartwood. Exactly. You are in the sapwood, the younger, outer ring of wood that sits just beneath the bark, which is where the water conducts. The sapwood is lighter in color than the heartwood, almost pale, cream, colored or faintly yellow, and it is alive in the way that the heartwood is not. Its xylem vessels are patent and clear, and the water you have followed from the root tips is moving through it now, slowly, drawn upward by the tension from above. The sapwood surrounds the heartwood in a layer that might be several inches thick in a tree this old, a living sleeve around a structural core. And within this sleeve, the water moves. You drift upward within it. The sensation is one of great vertical extension. The trunk rises above you for a distance that seems almost abstract, 100 feet, 200 feet, more. The xylem vessels are the same as they were in the roots, long hollow tubes stacked end to end, but here they are arranged in the vertical columns that will carry the water all the way to the canopy. The water in them is under tension, a real, Physical tension, like the tension in a stretched rubber band, generated by the pull of evaporation far above and transmitted downward through the unbroken column of water. The tension is significant. If you could measure it, you would find that the water in the upper parts of the tree is actually at a pressure below atmospheric. It is being pulled, not pushed. But this is ambient here. Background information, like the grain of the wood around you. What you notice is the movement, the slow upward drift, and the quality of the space. The trunk creaks, very slightly, almost imperceptibly. Wood under tension expands and contracts fractionally with changes in water content. And on a warm afternoon, the upper canopy loses water faster than the roots can supply it. And the trunk tightens slightly. On a cool, foggy morning like this one, the canopy loses less, and the trunk relaxes. This gentle daily flexion, a rhythm of tightening and releasing that follows the sun, is another form of the tree's breathing. Imperceptible from outside, continuous from within. You drift upward within the sapwood, and the scale of the journey becomes apparent in a way it was not quite from the outside of the tree. 350 feet is an abstraction when you are looking up from the forest floor. Your gaze traveling up and up until the crown is just a green smudge against the gray sky. From inside, it is a lived experience of distance. You can sense the length of the column of water you are part of, the way a single thread of something very long conveys its length through the tension distributed along it. You are one small part of a chain that extends from the cool dark of the soil far below to the bright, fog-washed air of the canopy far above, and the chain is under a gentle, continuous pull that you can feel as a kind of directional sense, an upward orientation, a soft insistence on the direction of travel. The bark outside the sapwood is extraordinary in its thickness. Redwood bark can be a foot thick or more at the base of old trees, a dense, fibrous, spongy layer that is one of the tree's primary defenses. It does not burn easily because it contains very little resin, and because its thickness insulates the living cambium and sapwood within from the heat of the forest fires that have swept through these forests many times over the centuries. The tree carries the scars of those fires in its bark, blackened channels and healed over wounds that the bark has slowly grown across, year by year, closing the scar with new layers of fibrous insulation. There is one such scar on the south side of this tree, beginning about 20 feet above the base and traveling upward for perhaps 30 feet, a long, dark channel where the outer bark was burned away in a fire, perhaps 300 years ago, and where the tree has since laid down new bark over the wound, not entirely concealing it, but integrating it into the tree's ongoing surface. The scar is part of the tree now, as much as any ring or root. The tree did not recover from the fire in the sense of returning to what it was before. It continued from where it was, incorporating the experience, growing forward. You are safe inside the trunk. The bark is all around you, thick and quiet. The heartwood is dense and permanent beside you. The sapwood carries you upward, slowly, in the water column, past the fire scars and the healed wounds and the 1,000 rings of history. You are traveling through a living archive, and it is very still. The light comes from somewhere above you, a faint awareness of brightness that grows very gradually as you rise. Not daylight, exactly, not yet, just the suggestion of it, the possibility of light arriving from a great distance. You drift upward with the water, unhurried, through the long, quiet column of the trunk, 100 feet, 150, The trunk narrows almost imperceptibly as you rise, still enormous, still wide beyond easy comprehension. But the taper is there, built into the geometry of the tree. The wood around you is just as dense, just as quiet, but the rings are closer together here. Growth is harder at this height, where the water has to travel farther to arrive, where the wind is more present, where the tree invests less in bulk and more in height. The water continues to rise. You continue with it. And very gradually, as you approach the first major branches, something changes in the quality of the space around you. The absolute stillness of the trunk begins to give way to something more various. The wood becomes less uniform. The branching begins. You are approaching the lower canopy. The first major branches depart from the trunk at a height where the forest floor has become almost theoretical, a dim and distant memory far below. You are perhaps 80 feet up, perhaps 100. The trunk around you is still wide, still the width of several people standing together, but it has shed some of its first few feet of bulk. And the bark outside, though still thick, has changed slightly in character. It catches more light up here, on the side that faces the diffuse brightness of the sky. The very faint green of algae has colonized its surface in patches, living on the moisture that the coastal fog deposits on the bark through the night and morning hours. The branches emerge from the trunk at shallow angles, extending outward and slightly upward, beginning as extensions almost as wide as a person's body and tapering over their length to something much finer. They are made of the same wood as the trunk, the same rings, the same sapwood, the same conducting vessels, but their grain runs outward rather than upward, carrying water and nutrients horizontally into the spreading arms of the tree. You drift outward along one of these branches, following the water as it diverges from the main trunk column and enters this lateral world. The branch is old. It has been here for centuries, growing outward year by year, adding a new ring each season, slowly extending its reach across the shaded lower interior of the canopy. The wood it is made of has the same warm red quality as the trunk, the same fibrous grain, the same slight give when touched. Hanging from the branch, arranged along its length in a pattern that has been optimized over millions of years of evolution, are the leaves of the lower canopy. Redwood leaves are needles, flat and small, perhaps half an inch long, arranged in 2 rows along each small twig, overlapping like the scales of a fish or the tiles of a roof. They are dark green on their upper surface, where they face the light, and pale green on their underside. They are not the short, dense needles of the upper canopy. These lower needles are longer, flatter, arranged to capture as much of the dim, filtered light as possible in the shaded interior of the forest. There is less light here than you might expect. Even at this height, the canopy above is dense and layered, and most of the light that enters the forest is captured by the highest needles before it can reach this level. The lower branches operate in perpetual soft shadow, conducting photosynthesis at a reduced rate, making do with what arrives. This is entirely appropriate. There is no urgency in it. The lower branches have been managing on this dim fraction of light for as long as they have existed, and will continue to do so. They are patient. The needles nearest to you are beaded with moisture. The fog that drifted through the forest in the early morning has left its water on every surface. The bark, the needles, the mosses that have colonized this branch's upper surface in a thin, yielding carpet. Fog drip. This is called the process by which coastal redwoods harvest moisture directly from fog, conducting it down through the needles and bark and eventually to the soil below. The redwood forest can receive the equivalent of significant rainfall through fog drip alone, in a summer when no rain falls. The tree does not wait for rain. It gathers what is in the air. You rest for a moment in the moisture of this branch. The fog water on the needles is cold and clean, carrying a faint mineral signature of the ocean air it traveled through. It will eventually run down the needle to the twig, from the twig to the branch, from the branch to the trunk, from the trunk to the root flares, and from there into the soil, where it may eventually be gathered up by the root hairs and begin the long upward journey again. Everything in this forest is circular. Everything returns. The sounds are different here than they were in the soil or the trunk. You can hear, faintly, the movement of air through the needles, a soft and continuous sound, lower pitched than the higher branches' movements, a gentle sighing that comes from no particular direction and has no particular rhythm. It is simply there, a background presence, the sound of the forest breathing around you. The branch itself has a particular quality of silence within its own sounds. If that makes sense, the way a very old room has its own ambient quiet that persists even when sounds occur within it. This branch has been here for centuries. It was here before anyone now living was born. It will be here long after. The mosses on its upper surface are green in all weathers, in all lights, a continuous and undemanding presence. They do not require sun to stay green. They simply are green, quietly and permanently, drawing what they need from the fog and the bark they rest on. There's a small pool of water where this branch meets the trunk, a slight hollow that collects fog drip and, in rainy season, actual rain. The water in this pool is perfectly still at this moment, a mirror the size of your palm, reflecting the pale sky far above with a surface tension so complete that small things could walk across it if they were light enough. An insect rests at its edge, motionless. The reflected sky in the pool's surface is a shade lighter than the actual sky above, filtered by the perfect smoothness of water at rest. You notice, drifting here in the lower canopy, that the scent of the forest is richest at this level. At the forest floor, the smell is of soil and decomposition and the cold, mineral earth. High in the upper canopy, the smell is of ocean air and resin and something cleanly vegetal. But here, in the lower canopy, both scents layer together with the smell of the mosses and the damp bark and the particular organic richness of a branch that has been accumulating life for centuries. It is the smell of the forest at its most itself, complex and cool and deeply alive in a way that doesn't announce itself, that simply is. On the branch surface beneath the moss, insects move slowly in the cool morning air. A beetle navigates the topography of bark. Something small and winged rests on a needle. Wings folded. None of this is dramatic. It is simply the dense, quiet life of an old branch, going about its business without urgency. The water that has followed you out along this branch is now moving into the petioles of the needles, the tiny stalks that connect each needle to the twig. From there it will enter the needle itself, and the needle is where the water's long journey ends, or rather, where it transitions from one phase to another. But you're not quite there yet. There are more branches above, more canopy to drift through, and the light is growing. Gently, you leave this branch and return to the trunk. The water carries you upward again. The mid-canopy is a different world. You are perhaps 150 feet above the forest floor now, perhaps 170. The density of the lower forest has thinned behind you, and more light arrives here, Not direct sunlight. Not yet. But light with more energy. Less filtered, more capable of driving the chemistry of the green needles. The branches up here are shorter than those below, less dramatically extending, and they are covered with a different kind of needle, shorter and more upright, catching light that arrives from a higher angle. The sky is fractionally more visible from here. Between the branches of this tree and its neighbors, you can see, or rather sense, the pale gray of the coastal sky, the soft, undifferentiated brightness of a foggy morning that has not yet resolved into direct sun. The fog is still present at this level, passing through the canopy in slow, drifting veils, depositing its moisture on every surface it contacts. The trunk here has narrowed to the width of a large table, perhaps 5 or 6 feet across. It is still immense by any ordinary standard, but it is perceptibly different from the vast pillar below. The bark is thinner here. The rings within are tighter, reflecting the harder conditions of greater height. The wind up here is a real presence, not the faint suggestion of air movement in the lower canopy, but an actual, perceptible force that causes the trunk to sway in its upper portions. The motion is very slight, a few inches, perhaps, at this height, but the tree is designed for it. Its wood flexible in ways that rigid wood cannot be, its roots wide, spreading to distribute the forces of movement into the earth far below. You can feel the sway, very gently, as you drift through the mid-canopy. It is like being on a very large, very slow vessel, a quality of movement so gradual and so gentle that it is barely distinguishable from stillness. Back and forth, almost imperceptibly, the entire upper portion of the tree moving as one in the coastal wind. All the trees in the forest move this way, slightly out of phase with each other, so that the canopy viewed from above looks like the surface of a very calm sea. The branches at this level support substantial communities of life. Mosses and lichens colonize every surface. Ferns grow in the angles between branch and trunk, their roots finding purchase in accumulated bark debris. Small birds move through the branches with quick, darting certainty, a movement so different from the tree's deep slowness that they seem to belong to a different category of time. They do, in a way. A bird's life moves at a pace almost incomprehensibly different from the tree's. A tree of this age has watched uncountable generations of birds pass through its branches, each generation as urgent and brief as the last, the tree outlasting all of them with its slow patience. The water has been rising all this time. You drift with it. At this height, the water column is under increasing tension. The pull from the evaporating needles above is stronger. The weight of the water below is greater. The physics of the long column working together to maintain the continuous flow. The sapwood here is narrower than below, and the vessels within it are conducting at a rate that is, by the standards of biological processes, remarkably slow, and by the standards of the tree, entirely normal. You pause in the mid-canopy and rest in the sway. There is something remarkable about being this high and this still simultaneously. The movement of the wind in the needles creates a sound that is nearly musical, a continuous, soft rushing that varies slightly in pitch and intensity as the wind gusts and settles. It is not the sound of individual needles moving, exactly, but the collective sound of millions of them, all responding to the same air, each adding its tiny contribution to the whole until the whole becomes a presence, a voice, a kind of breathing. The tree breathes. Not metaphorically, not entirely. The gas exchange happening in these needles is a real and continuous breath, carbon dioxide entering through tiny pores called stomata, oxygen released as a byproduct of photosynthesis, water vapor departing into the air. The tree is inhaling and exhaling all around you, doing it slowly, doing it at a rate so gradual you could not watch it happen, but doing it continuously, as it has done every day for 1,000 years, as it will continue to do for whatever centuries remain ahead. You breathe with it, in and out, slow and steady. The wind moves through the needles and the fog drifts, and the water continues its long upward pull, and there is nothing here in the mid-canopy that is not patient and continuous and calm. There are communities living in this part of the tree that have never touched the forest floor. Certain salamanders spend their entire lives in the high canopy of old redwoods, moving through the moss and accumulated debris on the large branches, drinking from fog. Drip pools, completely at home in a world 150 feet above the ground. Their whole world is this tree, this branch, this particular acre of fog and bark and slow wood. Flying squirrels nest in cavities in the trunk at this height. Owls find purchase on the broad limbs and sit very still in the early morning, motionless, their patience almost a match for the tree's own. All of these lives, conducted at an animal pace, within the infrastructure of the tree's ancient stillness, the tree providing the stage, the organisms living out their faster dramas within it, the tree outlasting all of them, all of their generations, all of their successions. There is something settling about being in the mid-canopy at this hour. In this fog, the world below is invisible, and the world above is just light, soft and directionless. You are suspended between two distances, held in the middle of something very tall, and nothing is required of you. The tree supports you, as it has supported every branch and needle and moss and salamander that has ever rested in it. The tree is accustomed to carrying things gently. The light brightens slightly above you. You drift upward. The upper canopy opens above you like the surface of a sea approached from below. You are very high now, 250 feet, perhaps 300. The forest floor is invisible, not just distant, but genuinely invisible, lost in the layers of branch and fog and the soft distance that accumulates between you and the ground. This is a different country entirely. The air here is cooler in some ways, and in other ways warmer. The fog is thinner, and on days when the coastal layer clears, direct sunlight falls on these uppermost needles for hours at a stretch, driving photosynthesis at rates the lower branches never experience. The trunk here is perhaps 2 feet across. The bark is thinner still. The tree has the quality of a mast up here, something made to move, to flex, to respond to wind rather than resist it. And the wind is real. You can feel it now. Even within the tree, a steady, gentle pressure from the west, from the ocean, carrying its freight of moisture and salt and the long cold that the Pacific has accumulated over its crossing. The needles up here are different from the lower ones, shorter, denser, arranged in a spiral around the twigs rather than in flat rows. They are adapted for direct light rather than diffuse light, for retaining moisture rather than maximizing surface area. They are slightly blue, green rather than the deep green of the lower needles, a color so particular to this tree in this light that there is almost no describing it. It is the color of old sea, glass, of a clear sky at a certain angle, of something that has been weathered by exactly the right amount of time. The crown of the tree is irregular and beautiful. The uppermost branches have been shaped by wind and light and the particular history of each growing season, so that no two branches are the same length, no two angles identical. The whole canopy, a record of adaptation and response over centuries. Some branches reach toward the south and the light. Some have grown back toward the trunk after the original tip was lost to wind or lightning, or the slow weight of ice in a winter many decades past. New growth emerges from unexpected places, the tree continuously rebuilding itself in the direction of available light. What you are floating through, here in the upper canopy, is the accumulated intelligence of the tree's long response to its environment. Not intelligence in any conscious sense, but the record of 1,000 years of response to the specific conditions of this specific place. Every branching angle is what it is because of the light that was available in the year that branch began to grow. Every ring in the wood below you represents a year of specific weather, the drought years thin, the wet years full, each ring a year of history compressed into a fraction of an inch. The tree is a record of its place, and its place is this coastal forest, this particular watershed, this particular angle of fog, diffused light. You drift among the uppermost branches, and the sky is visible now, really visible, not just sensed. The pale gray of the coastal morning above, brightening toward the south where the fog is thinner, darkening toward the ocean where another bank of mist is gathering. The tops of other redwoods are visible too, their crowns at roughly similar heights. The whole canopy spread below and around you like a green sea, moving slightly in the wind, continuous and ancient. The fog that passes through this upper canopy is measurably enriched as it moves through. Studies of redwood forests have found that the air downwind of the trees carries different chemistry than the air arriving from the ocean, touched by terpenes and organic acids released from the needles, by the water vapor from transpiration, by the particular signature of this living system. The forest is not merely in its environment, it changes its environment, continuously and in every direction, the way anything very large and very alive inevitably does. The water is very nearly at its destination. You can feel the pull of evaporation above you, the tension in the water column drawing everything upward, the culmination of the long journey from the root tips through the root network, through the trunk, through the branching and rebranching to these final twigs, these final needles, where the journey will end in a small and quiet release. But first, this. You rest in the upper canopy and feel the wind move through the needles around you. The sound here is fuller than below, a broad, sustained tone with variations, the way a large instrument makes sound. The whole crown contributing to a resonance that you can feel as much as hear. The tree moves in it, the upper trunk swaying in its narrow arc, the branches dipping and rising, the needles streaming slightly in the direction of the wind. Birds pass through at this level, ravens, perhaps, or a large hawk, riding the thermals that form on the warmer afternoons when the fog has retreated. They are visitors here, briefly occupying this space and then moving on, their lives as transient to the tree as a single day is transient to the millennium. The tree notices nothing. The tree does not notice. It simply grows and breathes and draws water from the earth and releases it to the sky. The fog condensing on the needles near you forms tiny droplets that run together when they grow large enough, beating along the needle's edge until their weight exceeds the surface tension holding them and they fall. A single drop, falling 250 feet to the forest floor, where it will join the soil, join the groundwater, eventually join the roots' quiet gathering. Everything falls and rises. Everything rises and falls. You breathe with the wind in the needles, slow and steady, and feel the pull of the sky above, and follow the water to its final destination. You are at the very tip of a needle, near the crown of the tree. The needle is perhaps half an inch long, barely perceptible from the forest floor. If you could see it from there, which you cannot, from here, it is the whole world. A flat, slightly keeled surface, green and waxy and precise, covered on its underside with two thin lines of pale color, the stomatal bands, where the tiny pores that regulate gas exchange are arranged in rows so fine they cannot be seen without magnification. The pores are open. They open and close in response to light and temperature and humidity, controlled by a mechanism of extraordinary delicacy, two guard cells surrounding each pore that expand or contract depending on conditions, opening the pore when photosynthesis is possible and the air is not too dry, closing it when water loss would be too great. This morning, in the cool fog, they are open. Carbon dioxide is entering. Oxygen is departing. Water vapor is departing. You drift very close to one of these pores, close enough that the scale of it becomes perceivable. It is microscopic, invisible to the unaided eye, and yet the exchange that occurs through it is the exchange that matters most. The air inside the needle is saturated with water vapor, warm and humid from the living cells. The air outside the needle is slightly less humid, even in the fog. The air is not quite as wet as the needle's interior, and so water vapor diffuses outward, from higher concentration to lower, following the gradient without any effort or intention. This is evaporation, not a pump, not a valve, not a decision. Simply the universal tendency of moisture to distribute itself toward dryness, of concentration to move toward diffusion. Every water molecule that leaves through this pore is following physics as old as the universe. The tree simply provides the vessel, the xylem and the sapwood and the roots and the root hairs, through which the water can travel on its way from the wet soil to the dry air. This is the destination of the water you have followed from the root tips. The water entered this needle through its petiole and moved into the mesophyll cells, the green, photosynthesizing cells that fill the needle's interior. In those cells, water participates in photosynthesis, split by light energy into hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen used to fix carbon from the carbon dioxide entering through the stomata. The oxygen released as the gas that all of this forest's animals are breathing right now. Some of the water is incorporated into sugars, which will be transported down through the phloem, the tree's other conducting tissue, to wherever growth is needed, to new buds forming at the branch tips, to the cambium adding new rings to the trunk, to the root tips extending themselves another fraction of a millimeter through the soil. But most of the water simply leaves. It evaporates from the surfaces of the mesophyll cells, enters the air spaces within the needle, diffuses toward the open stomata, and then passes out of the needle into the air of the canopy. The process is called transpiration, and it is entirely passive, driven by the difference in humidity between the saturated interior of the needle and the drier air outside. The water does not choose to leave. It simply follows the gradient, as water always does, moving from where it is concentrated to where it is less so. And as it leaves, it pulls, that gentle, continuous pull that you felt all the way down in the root network. That slight tension in the water column is generated here, at the needle tip, by the departure of each molecule of water into the air. Every molecule that leaves creates a tiny deficit, a tiny pull, transmitted instantly through the unbroken water column all the way to the root tip. where another molecule of water is drawn in from the soil to replace it. The tree breathes out, and the roots breathe in. It is happening all over the crown, simultaneously, in millions of needles, each one releasing water molecules into the coastal air, each departure sending its tiny signal down through the water column to the roots. The whole tree coordinated by nothing more than physics. Nothing more than the universal tendency of water to flow toward where water is needed. You are at the moment of release. A single molecule of water, this particular molecule, the one you have traveled with from the root tip, through the root network, through the trunk and branch and twig to this needle, passes through a stoma and enters the air. It is a very small thing, a molecule, invisible, weightless in any meaningful sense. But it carries with it the memory of its journey, the cool dark of the soil, the slow gathering of root hairs, the long vertical pull through sapwood, the mid-canopy sway, the upper crown wind. In the air, it will join billions of other water molecules just like it, released from every needle of every tree in the forest, rising slowly in the morning air, joining the larger movement of the coastal atmosphere, becoming part of the fog bank that will drift back over the trees tomorrow morning, condensing on cold needle surfaces, falling as fog drip to the forest floor, entering the soil. The journey does not end. It circles. Water becomes fog, becomes rain, becomes soil, becomes root, becomes sapwood, becomes needle, becomes air, becomes fog again. Round and round, as it has been doing for as long as the forest has been here. As long as this tree has been here, for 1,000 years, this tree has been turning water into sky, and sky into water, breathing out into the fog and drawing in from the earth, participating in the ancient, circular exchange that makes this forest what it is. You hover at the needle tip, in the cool morning air, and the forest spreads below you in every direction, green and vast and breathing. Above the needle tips, there is sky. You have drifted free of the tree now, not departed from it, not left it behind, but simply floated above the canopy into the pale space, where the air moves freely and the fog is present not as a dense bank, but as a diffuse softness, a moisture in the air, a gentle indeterminacy of light. The canopy is spread below you, and it is beautiful in the way that only very large and very old things are beautiful. Not the beauty of a single striking thing, but the beauty of a whole, a completeness, a pattern that has taken longer to develop than a human life can measure. The crowns of the redwoods extend in every direction, varying slightly in height, slightly in color. Each tree an individual with its own particular history of fire and fog and drought and abundance, but all of them participating in the same patient process, all of them drawing water from the same deep soil and releasing it to the same sky. The water you have followed has already dispersed into the air around you. It is no longer a molecule attached to a tree. It is part of the atmosphere now, part of the moisture that moves on the coastal wind, that will condense and fall and be gathered again, patient and cyclical and without end. From up here, you can see the way the fog moves through the canopy, entering from the west on the morning air, drifting in long, slow veils through the crown, departing transformed. The fog arrives as ocean moisture, collected over thousands of miles of open water, and it leaves having touched the needles, having deposited some of its water, having been filtered through the green living surface of the forest, changed. More humid in some places, drier in others, richer in the chemical compounds that the forest releases, terpenes and organic acids, and the particular scent that makes a redwood forest smell the way it does, which is a smell that exists nowhere else on Earth and once encountered is never entirely forgotten. The smell of the forest reaches you even up here, faint but present. The resinous coolness of the heartwood, the greenness of the needles, the dampness of the soil far below, all of it mixing with the salt of the ocean air into something that has no adequate description. You breathe it in, and it is a smell that seems to belong to time itself, to the kind of deep time that the tree inhabits, to a pace of existence so slow and so continuous that the word time barely applies. All around you, the fog drifts. It is not a thick fog, just the coastal morning haze, softening the edges of things, giving the light its particular quality of diffused evenness, removing shadows and contrast, and the sense of hard edges that comes with direct sun. In this light, the canopy below you looks continuous, unbroken, a surface of green and gray, green extending in all directions, interrupted only where the trees are spaced far enough apart for a glimpse of the forest floor far below. You float in this fog, in this cool and even light, and you are aware of a great quietness that extends in all directions. Not the absence of sound. The wind is present. The needles are murmuring. Somewhere far below a bird calls once and is quiet, but a fundamental quiet beneath and behind all of this, a quiet that belongs to the forest itself, to its scale and age and the patience of its processes. Below you, the forest breathes. You can see it. If you hold your attention very still, as a faint shimmer in the air above the canopy, the collective transpiration of millions of trees, releasing water vapor in continuous, invisible clouds, adding to the fog, contributing to the cloud that will eventually deliver rain to the forest floor. Rain that will filter down through the leaf litter and the soil. Rain that will be gathered by root hairs and drawn upward once again. The tree you have traveled through is down there somewhere. One among thousands, indistinguishable from this height. Its particular history, the fire scar, the 1,000 rings, the particular arrangement of its upper crown branches shaped by 1,000 years of particular winds, is invisible from here. It is simply part of the forest. And the forest is simply part of the watershed. And the watershed is simply part of the coast. And the coast goes on. You drift in the cool air above the canopy. There is nothing demanding your attention here. No urgency. No arrival waiting. The sky is the same in every direction, pale and soft and deep with moisture, and the canopy is the same in every direction. And the sound of the wind in the highest needles is the same continuous, patient sound that it has always been, that it will continue to be long after you have drifted away from this place. You breathe. The tree breathes below you. The forest breathes, all of it together. The collective breath of millions of organisms participating in the same slow, continuous exchange of water and air and light that has been happening here, in this place, for longer than any of them have been alive. You breathe with it. Very gently, without any hurry, you find yourself drifting downward. Not falling, drifting. The way a leaf drifts when it has separated from a branch and the air is very still. You move through the upper canopy again, through the blue, green needles and the coastal light, and the sound of the wind in the branches receives you like something familiar, like a sound you have known for a long time. The needles close around you as you descend, the light softening as the canopy layers accumulate above. You have made this journey, root to sky, and now the return is its own kind of journey, not a reversal, but a different passage through the same spaces. The wind is above you now. The soil is below. The tree extends in both directions, upward and downward, always both simultaneously. Never, only one. Down through the mid-canopy, where the fog is a little thicker and the light is a little softer and the sway of the tree is a little more perceptible. The branches here are old and patient and covered in moss, and they have been here for longer than you have been alive, and they will be here long after. There is comfort in this, a deep, structural comfort, the kind that comes from being in the presence of something that does not require anything of you. The salamanders in their secret lives on the high branches do not know you are here. The beetles in the bark go about their slow work. The tree breathes. You breathe. You notice, descending, how each level of the canopy has its own particular light, the quality of brightness changing as you pass through each layer, the fog contributing differently at each height, the tree's own needles filtering and redirecting what arrives from above. The lower canopy receives the light that has been processed by everything above it, softened and diffused to something gentle and green, almost luminous, the color of light inside a cathedral made of living things. Down through the lower branches, where the light is green and diffuse, and the needles are long and flat and beaded with fog water, where the sounds of the forest floor are beginning to make themselves known again, faint, muffled, a different register than the wind. In needles of the canopy, the creak of wood settling, the quiet drip of fog water from one needle to another, down through the base of the trunk, past the fire scars and the healed wounds and the 1,000 rings of slow growth. The heartwood is all around you, dense and permanent and patient. The bark is thick and fibrous and cool. The root flares spread from the base like great red, brown wings, pressing into the soil, connecting this towering thing to the earth below. Down into the soil, the cool dark receives you, as it always has, as it always will. The mineral scent is all around you, rich and deep, the smell of time and slow transformation. The root network is here, threading in every direction through the earth, gathering water from the soil in its quiet and continuous way, feeding the long column that reaches all the way to the needles above. You rest in the soil, in the dark, in the cool. Above you, the tree continues. It does not need you to be watching. It has been breathing for 1,000 years, drawing water from the earth and releasing it to the sky, adding a new ring each year to its trunk, extending its roots another inch into the surrounding soil, healing over old wounds with new bark, adjusting its crown branches toward available light. It will continue this way, quietly and without drama, for whatever time remains. The fog will drift through its canopy tomorrow morning, as it did this morning, as it will for as long as the ocean remains and the land remains and the forest remains. The water molecules you followed have already dispersed into the atmosphere. They are somewhere over the coastal mountains now, perhaps, or already returning in the fog that is gathering offshore. They will find their way back. They always do. Everything here is circular. Everything here returns. You breathe in the cool dark of the soil and let the tree breathe above you, and the sound of it reaches you even here, a faint, continuous sound, transmitted through root and earth, the sound of wind in needles so high above they are invisible, the sound of the tree breathing in and out, slow and steady, as it has always done. The forest floor is soft above you, fallen needles and moss, and the compressed remains of centuries of seasons, all of it becoming soil, all of it becoming the medium through which the roots feed and the water gathers. You are resting in something that the tree has been building for 1,000 years, the slow accumulation of its own fallen self, composted and transformed and made available again. The light above the forest is changing, very slowly, toward the warmth of mid-morning. The fog is beginning to thin at the highest levels. In the crown of the tree, the stomata are adjusting to the changing light, opening a little wider, the rate of photosynthesis increasing fractionally, the rate of transpiration increasing with it. More water is being drawn up from the roots. The pull in the water column intensifies, barely, almost immeasurably. In the soil, the root hairs are responding. A little more water crossing into the root. A little more water beginning the long journey upward. The journey continues. It has always been continuing. You can rest here in the cool dark, cradled by the root network, surrounded by the scent of ancient soil, and the tree will breathe above you, drawing water from wherever you are and carrying it up toward the light. There is no need to follow. You have already made the journey. You have traveled from the deepest root tips to the highest needle crown and back again, carried by water through the quiet interior of something that has been alive for 1,000 years. The sound of wind in needles reaches you from somewhere very far above. Slow and steady, in and out. The tree breathes, and the forest breathes with it, and you breathe with the forest. Slow and deep and continuous, and without any hurry at all. The water gathers in the roots, as it always has. The roots press into the soil, as they always have. The soil holds everything, as it always has, cool and dark and patient, the oldest and most reliable thing in this entire ancient place. You are held. The tree breathes above you, and the forest is quiet, and the fog moves through the canopy in its slow, drifting veils. And somewhere in the crown, water molecules are departing into the air, one by one, beginning their own long return journey through cloud and rain and soil. Everything returns. The journey continues, always, in the slow breath of the ancient redwood. And if you find yourself drifting away from this forest, if sleep carries you somewhere else entirely, know that the tree will be here when you return. Still breathing, still drawing water from the earth, still releasing it to the sky. 1,000 years old, and patient enough to wait for you. Rest now.